a project we're just started working on it, so it's not a final project. So for today, what we try to do here is to introduce the motivation of this study, why we're doing it, and we have been collected a little bit preliminary studies, preliminary data from spring and winter quarter. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So Sang-Yan Park is my doctoral student, and she's leading on this project, and she's working with Melissa on this. So what we're trying to do today is Sang-Yan is going to talk about the background of this project and what we're trying to do, and some kind of literature reviews. And after that, because this is a IT program, and I know a lot of people are from engineering background, we're going to introduce a little bit about informatics research methodology. So for this kind of project, how are we going to analyze data? And then we will leave the funding part for Melissa to present next week and in August. So this is the whole structure of this today's talk. And I will leave this for Sang-Yan to start, and I will talk about the method part later.
Okay, so do you hear me well? Can you hear me? Okay. So we are working on the project called Technology for Managed Migraine. So obviously we're studying some people with migraine here. Okay. What is the migraine? The definition based on PubMed Health, a migraine is a recurrent throbbing headache that typically affects one side of head and is often accompanied by nausea, vomiting, a sensitivity to light, or disturbed vision. How many people here have migraine? Oh, okay, 6 or 7. That's great. So you might be interested. But, so what is the problem with migraine? According to World Health Organization, 25% women, 1 out of 4 female, and 8% of men get migraine sometime in their lifetime. And 8% of men and 20% of women experience migraine each year based on European and American studies. Although migraine is one of the most common neurological diseases in adults, patients that exhibit migraine symptoms are often underdiagnosed and undertreated because migraines comes and goes away and come back, and people don't take it that serious. Most migraine occurs between the age of 25 and 50. Moreover, studies have estimated that half of these people do not even know that they have migraines. Instead, they think like they believe they experience some sort of sinus headache. Despite this common disorder, the reason that migraine are not often undertreated, are often undertreated is a migraine is invisible. So the symptoms of migraine describe characteristics like pain intensity, location, and alignments in other body parts. Also, people experience migraine with different frequency, ranging from once a year to once a month, or once a week. So this large range of uncertainty of symptoms make it difficult, particularly to detect migraine, especially since every individual experiences a different combination of symptoms. Furthermore, patients are generally ignorant of the classification and treatment of migraines, thus they tend to use over-the-counter drugs rather than seek help from doctors for longer-term treatment or management. In addition, since the disease is invisible to the doctors who is trying to help patients, and also is invisible to the patient who lacks knowledge of migraine characteristics, diagnosis is entirely dependent on communication between a patient and doctor. From the literature review, we found that migraine is very different from other chronic diseases, such as cancer or diabetes, because of the individualized symptoms and treatments. Although many chronic diseases have individualized triggers, like for example for asthma, dust and pollens are common triggers for them, but some people might have different ones. However, not much is known about physiological basis of migraine, so treatments are purely try and error. More is known about cancer, diabetes, asthma, because there's more physiological understanding of how to combat this disease. But for migraine, even though it feels like a headache, they can be so much more than that. So pain medication does not really work efficiently. Also, there's no specific diagnostic test, so it is very difficult for physicians to confirm diagnosis. Diagnosis is often based on patients' observational symptoms, such as which is internal feeling of discomfort. Furthermore, patients often feel uncomfortable describing their disease because there's no way to scientifically prove they're experiencing the pain. In the previous studies, various health monitoring systems have been developed for other chronic diseases, and those systems knows exactly what to measure and support those disease management. However, for migraine, we are not sure what to measure and look for exactly because of the individuality of the disease, such as individualized symptoms, triggers, and medication. So everything can produce a migraine. This note was the often expressed view in migraine studies. Most of previous and current studies about migraine are medical-driven works, such as how to diagnose migraine, how to find out triggers, and how to treat migraine in terms of medication and side effects from other diseases. However, there are not many studies on patients, such as how to cope with difficulties in living with migraine in daily lives, and how to balance work between school, work, and home, and how to get social support from families and friends or work colleagues. Also, migraine has not been really explored in informatics and HCI field. Although many medical papers and current migraine apps out there are trying to provide more information to help patients find out their triggers, they require those systems and apps. They required patients to recall and remember each incident, such as what they did, what they ate that day, and how severe the migraine was. So they have to remember it whenever they had migraine. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to examine people's migraine management experience in order to better understand common and effective practices. This knowledge will serve as a guide to design technologies that will help migraine sufferers to easily find triggers and better manage their illness in daily life. So here are the research methods. So the top four, we are actually utilizing those methods to conduct our study, and those two which are highlighted as gray part, that ones are possible research methods we're potentially use in the future as a next step. So we're going to talk about one by one from here. So first one, online form observation. First, we wanted to see what's out there about migraine, what people are doing online. So we wanted to get a bit, just big sense of what's migraine. So we examined online patient communities to understand the types of information patients looking for, social supports among peer patients, and health professionals' involvement with this online community. We look at 5, 6, many different websites we can possibly find. Then we narrowed down to 2 websites, which were mymigraineconnection.com and webmd.com as representative samples of the online communities. And we saw people with migraine asking about medication, treatment, and symptoms. An interesting thing was, since they have all different individualized experience or symptoms, they really try to look for who has similar experience with them, who has similar symptoms with them. So they try to look for what other kinds of symptoms there out there, and they want to share emotions like frustration in their daily lives, how hard it is to deal with migraine in their lives, and they try to seek for those social support from other patients. And after that, we started doing our contextual interview. So contextual interview is basically we go to the patient's house or where they're living and start doing semi-structured interviews. So we ask questions like how frequently do you get migraines, and how do you deal with that? What is your medication? And do you use curtain if they sensitive to the lights? They use curtain. How they just make self comfortable and to cope to deal with those migraines. So if they show any tools, we are going to take a picture. But by the way, I just want to let you know that this picture is not from our migraine study. This is from my previous study when I was studying how people use their bags. Because I was developing a smart bag. So I just used this picture because I didn't have time to make a collage. So pretty much we take any photos if they do something, like if they have used any sort of a calendar, use mobile phone, we took all those photos. So we try to be more contextualized when we conduct interviews. So we interviewed 12 migraine patients so far to examine how they deal with migraine in their daily lives. So from here, Professor Yunan Chen will talk about how to conduct interviews as an HCI methods.
I'm just going to talk a little bit more on the slides. So obviously, it's really important for us to interview people at their homes. I mean, a lot of times we interview people at their real working or living environment. I can say it's really important to do that in our study. For example, the triggers of migraine, like Sanya mentioned. A lot of times people are sensitive to light. Sometimes people are, there are some physical layout in their home which affects their disease management. So going to their home is a really good way for us to understand what's really happening. And we can take pictures, we can really understand that. And for that kind of interview, if we ask people, say if we schedule a time and meet them in the Starbucks and we talk with them, we're not going to get that much details. We're not going to get the contextualized information from the interviews. So we already did 12 migraine interviews, and I think we are hoping to get a few more severe patients because the disease is so individualized. For every single patient, they have different triggers, they have different syndromes. And for those who have really severe migraine, and they usually have a lot of strategies of coping with it. So when we interviewed 1 or 2 really severe migraine patients, they have all kinds of ways to prevent their migraine from happening. They have ways to, they have challenge and difficulties communicating with their colleagues, with their co-workers. I think there's actually some interviews or online data we got. The patient actually mentioned when she said she has migraine and she cannot work, her boss wouldn't understand it because no one take that seriously if they don't really have this similar disease. We're also in the process of interviewing a few doctors. We're also interested to hear about the other side of concerns. So as a doctor, what their difficulties are, diagnosing this disease and communicating with patients. Again, this disease is not something you can measure. So it's purely based on what patients communicate to doctors. And it's so individualized. Sometimes it's really difficult for doctors to get the information they're looking for. So we're trying to get the concerns from both sides. And we're in the process of finalizing our interview studies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the interviews. I know most of the people here are actually engineering majors. So when we do the informatics type of research, it's very different from coding, doing some, designing some new hardware and coding a new program. A lot of times we call this informatics type of research, or we call this human-computer interaction type of research. Very interesting thing in this type of research is we try to understand users, we try to understand people as a way to design technologies. So we're not really trying to say we wanted to build a really fancy technology for patients. But sometimes we actually searched on the iPhone app. There are a lot of applications for people to manage their headache, migraines, but a lot of them, we tried it, a lot of them are not really well designed. A lot of times there's a gap with the technology you want to design and the technology people really need. So what this project is trying to do is to try to find out what people really need from this kind of user studies. And then we will go forward with designing some kind of technology to help people. So I will start with how we get the feedback and opinions things from people. As Sanya mentioned before, the first step we did is the online forum analysis. So basically, I have migraine, but I also want to know other people, what they experience, what are the difficulties and challenges. We found a few online forums. We look at what people been communicating, what kind of question they have on this, they're trying to get from those online forums. And we did some initial data analysis, and we found some difficulties and challenges. And then we try to do some user interviews, because those forums, the data are already there. People already mentioned something on those online community. We're not able to follow up with them. And a lot of times, it's not for research. I just have some migraine syndromes. I really wanted to ask if anyone else has a similar problems. I think the online forum analysis, and a lot of patients were asking, I feel like every time I eat some kind of fruit, like I eat a banana, I might have migraine. I also want to know who else have similar experience. Is it just me, or there's something else? So they're trying to always conform with others. After we get that initial information, we try to get in-depth answers from the real people in their real living environment. So we're actually doing a semi-structured interviews. As a methodology class, I'd like to talk a little bit about what kind of interviews people would use in HCI type of studies. So there are 3 types of interviews people usually use. When you're talking to people, try to get people's opinions on something. You can use very structured interviews. This very structured interviews, sometimes people even call this user surveys. So a lot of medical studies are doing this type of work. I hire a research assistant. I ask the research assistant to call maybe 1,000, 2,000 patients. Every single one, we ask them 3 questions. Do you have migraine? What medication you're taking? And how severe you think you are? So people would rank from 1 to 5 and give you those answers. Those type of studies, we call it structured. Or it could be an online survey or other type of survey. And the good thing about this structured interview is you get a lot of feedback from people. And a lot of times, those are from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, 1 to 7. You can just analyze it really quick. We got the numbers. We could easily report 70% of people have rated themselves as level 3. It bothers their life. From 1 to 5, they think it's medium impact on their life. However, this type of study, you got a number, but then you can see it's really hard to generalize what it means from there. So we got it, so what? And how can you help people from there? So a lot of times in informatics type of research, we do structured or unstructured or something we call it in-depth interviews. So semi-structured interviews, we usually have an interview guide. So we know a little bit about what we're trying to talk with people. We sometimes have a script. We have initial introduction, some kind of questions, things we wanted to ask in the interviews. This type of interviews is a way I like the most, because clearly I have a goal. I know what I want to study. And we did some initial analysis looking at what people's concerns in those online forums. And we wanted to contextualize those questions and ask people in-depth questions about their opinions and questions. So unstructured interviews or in-depth interviews, sometimes we don't bring anything. We just talk to people and to get a lot of opinions from people. And this type of interview, a lot of times we don't know much about people's experience. We don't know what's going on. And we just have it as open-ended as possible. So as I said, we're using the semi-structured interview, and we have a list of themes and questions we want to use every time. I actually talked a little bit about this already. So when we say this is semi-structured, it's really something in the middle. We're not really asking people to answer exactly this 10 question order, follow this order. We have just a flexible script and a few major concerns we wanted to get people's opinions on. And from there, we can introduce ourselves, we can talk with people. And those orders of questions are flexible. We can always change that. And we don't always ask the same question. For example, when you try to ask some questions, when patient mentions something different. For example, I wanted to ask about how weather impacts their disease management or migraine management. However, this patient does not have a problem with weather. This patient talked about some kind of food, like maybe eating spicy food is a way to trigger their migraine. Things I never thought before. I would incorporate that in my interview. So we have a script to talk about maybe social support, how to manage disease, your triggers, medications, but we keep it flexible. When we encounter new things, we just adapt and incorporate that in the interviews. So this is the way we do the semi-structured interviews. So first, when you do this kind of study, you develop a set of initial research interview questions. You want to have a few topics, things you want to discover. For example, well, we're really interested in how people manage their migraine and how people manage being as a patient, how they situate themselves in relationship with their colleagues, with their family members, how they balance being as a patient and being as a wife, a mother, and serving on some important roles in their working environment. So how people manage to do that at the same time. And like if patient might have migraine once a week and they cannot work afterwards, and how they manage to get their work coverage when certain situation happens, how they manage to get other people understand their difficulty and challenges they're experiencing. So those kind of things are our major concerns. And then from there, you have to design your initial question based on the goal you have. The goal we have is eventually we want to design some technology to help people. So the objective of the study, once the objective of the study is clear, we're able to get a sense of, we could ask people what can help them, what you think can help you, and what you've been done in the past have helped you. So if from there, we can have a sense, okay, what kind of technology could help people? Whether people really need something like documenting their daily behaviors, or people need something else, like maybe emotional support, social support, all the other things. And then we, under each topics, we have a set of initial questions. Remember, those questions are flexible. We're always adapting and changing them. And then from there, we create a set of questions, and we go with people and we ask with people. So I actually didn't have these slides. A lot of times we go in as a pairs. So we have two people going interview at the same time. One is taking notes, the other is audio recorded it. So we always have the audio recording because it's capture everything. When people are talking, they're talking really quick. There's no way for you to say, I always remember that. And more importantly, sometimes the recording would give you a sense of people's emotions, frustrations. You can tell a lot of things from listening to those recordings and how conversation is actually initiated and their tones, whether they have some certain kind of emotions, their needs involved in the conversation process. So this is the how it looks like. So basically, we bring this set of questions, interview script, and we go in to talk to people. We have one person take notes, the other take audio recordings. After we're done with this, we transcribe the audio recordings line by line. So basically, like, for example, what I said here, if you audio record it, you transcribed it every single line, and then that's our initial data. And we also take pictures. Sometimes we also collect some kind of artifact from people's living environment. For example, I did a lot of diabetes studies in the past. A lot of diabetes patients, they have a diary talking about their glucose numbers, glucose readings every day, what they eat every day, what kind of exercise they did every day. In that case, this actually creates a really, really rich information repository for us to use. So you can collect it, you can make a copy. Sometimes the patient with diabetes, they take this diary for like 3 years, 5 years, and you can see how things evolved. Like initially, they probably have no idea what would work for them. And maybe 3 months later, 6 months later, they have some initial idea. 2 years later, I found people just don't take those notes anymore. And those are really important things for you to think about, what they learned in the process. By examining those kind of information artifacts, it gives us a sense of how people actually manage to deal and living with their disease. So those kind of things we collect. And afterwards, what we're going to do with it. Obviously, like I said earlier on, if you have a structured interview, we ask people 10 questions and ask them to answer from 1 to 5 what you feel which categories you belong to. Once you have that kind of data, it's kind of easy to analyze, because it's just, you could calculate it, you could do some statistical analysis on it. But for this qualitative type of analysis, it takes a long time to really think about, okay, now we have some collected interviews, interview transcript, we have some document collected from people, we have some pictures. How we relate all those things together? That is the really challenge question. When we generate our research findings, when we developing some kind of design guidelines to design technology, we can't really bring a whole people's interview, one person's entire interview, and say, this happened to these people. We really need to think about the themes in different people, occurring in different people. We need to extract those themes out. So this, actually there's a lot of ways to analyze those data using the qualitative analysis method. So I'm actually going to talk about one way that often used in informatics or HCI type of study, and it's really interesting, it's a really fun way to do. So I'm going to talk about this as the main way into this talk. I actually talked with a lot of other people who do qualitative coding, and a lot of them, they never heard about this term, but it's really common and popular methodology in HCI studies. We call this as affinity diagrams. So the basic idea, as you can see the pictures here, and we didn't take a picture, but in our lab, we have a picture of the affinity diagrams we did for this project. We use the different colors, as you can see here. You write down things in different colors of postage, and those things you write down on each, we call it post notes, affinity notes. On each affinity notes are things you found in your interviews. For example, we interviewed 12 people. We collect a lot of data, other kind of data like information document, online document. We read through it, we mark out this line or this part people talked about something, and we put that on affinity note. After you're done with affinity note, we're trying to put all the data together. For example, we have 12 interviews. We might generate 300, 500 affinity notes. And this is really a good way for us to see things from bottom up. So we have those affinity notes. Each have a really concrete ideas on it. For example, one may be, my migraine always triggered by weathers in certain situations. Or the other is about something, I always feel frustrated because I cannot talk to my doctors. Or maybe it's my boss didn't understand my situation and he does not want me to take a break when I have this disease. All those kind of very detailed, lots of information on those individual notes. And what we do is we find somewhere like in the big room, and we post those notes on the wall, and then we work through all those things. For example, we would bring in a field. I mean, I don't think I have the slides here, but we will bring in the field, and we start grouping them. So we group them, the first field, and then once you find one, it's not belonging to this category. For example, the one we found, it's not really about triggers. It's about how people communicate with others. We put that in the second bin. And then we have the third, we have the fourth. It's really try to group the ideas across multiple user interviews and based on different themes. Once we have it, I think I don't have the picture here, but the idea is once we have it, we would have some higher level categories. For example, we put the notes there. All those things on these areas is about patient trigger. And all those things on the other side of the wall is about how people, the challenges to communicate with others. And once you have those kind of things, you can bring in the even higher level of categories. Those whole part is about social support. Those whole big part is about disease management. So once you have those kind of affinity diagrams, it's really help people to understand it from bottom up, from concrete codes to bigger themes. So this is a way, actually a process we're actually working on right now. So it helps people familiar with your data. So we have those data, but reading the interviews won't help you at some time. You wanted to see the themes. What are the themes in your data? This is a really good way because once you group them together, you can see, you can have a clear picture what's in your data. It's bottom up, so the bigger themes won't come until you understand the lower levels of grouping mechanism, how I group that and why I put them in different bins. And then it's can also help people to uncover a lot of other issues. The things we usually got, I think, from a lot of the affinity diagrams, this analysis, we got a lot of facts, like key facts, what really bothers with people. This is something we're envision we would do. And also, sometimes, just to broaden this up, this interview would be, I talk with people, when you're using the cell phone, what is your experience with that? Or when you're using computer systems, programming systems, what's your experience with that? And it could also give you a sense of what's wrong with the technology. So there's a lot of things you can cover from there. And it's not only about people's living behaviors. Very important notes of doing that is don't filter or get through some important notes because you don't know what's actually there. This type of study analysis is very exploratory. You have to bottom up and see what you have in the data. Sometimes there might be some kind of categories people don't really know, and you would only uncover it through doing this kind of study process. It gives people a lot of sense what we can learn from the diagrams. Obviously, every single one has different ideas about how you want to group things, how you want to group notes. What we usually do is we work in small teams. So this is actually something Sanya and I are going to do later this week. We will discuss the different things and resolve the disagreement in a small team. When I teach this in my graduate class, a group of 4 or 5 people talk together. Why you group put these notes under these categories? What's the reason behind that? What do you mean by this whole group of notes? And it's really give people a sense to communicate and understand your data. And what we can find from the affinity diagrams, this type of data analysis, sometimes we would flag it. If this is some design ideas, for example, the patient might tell us, I think something would help me. I think a diary type of application would help me. Or I think something automatic tracking of my certain behavior would help me. They would give us design ideas what we can do. Of course, we're not taking a single point design idea, but if every single one mentions something would help them, that's something we should pursue in our design. There may be some breakdowns. For example, the breakdowns in our study may be breakdowns in communication process. I really can't describe my problem clear enough to my family members. There's a lot of my other studies, the breakdown would be the system cannot support certain kind of my task, or the technology doesn't support certain part of my workflow. So there's a lot of breakdowns you can identify. And you can also identify other things like this is a really inside customer or user code. We're going to use it. So you can also mark it in the different colors or you mark it in the different letters. So doing that, this whole process really just give you a whole big picture. What you have in your data, what are the main themes, and what you can find from there. So I actually just feels like I actually talked the whole process already, like communication, what people are using. And a lot of times when we do this type of study, we do multiple round iterations. It's very unlikely the first time we would have the final result. So when you did the first time, we talk about it, maybe the first round of coding, we break things into different categories based on very obvious things, like those are triggers, those are strategy people used, the things people communicated, those are things people note down. And the second round, you would go further from there, maybe something beyond that level. For example, this is the social support, this is family support, and a lot of other things. This is the emotional concerns. So there's many, many other things from there. And one of the topics we're trying to do right now is the invisibility of the disease. How is different from other kind of disease? People, what kind of concern being as a disease that are not recognized by their family members, their friends, not known by their doctors, and sometimes not even visible to patient themselves. And then what we can do from that perspective. So there's a lot of things you can do by reshuffle those affinity notes and by thinking about this from different perspectives. I'm going to skip these slides because it's basically similar ideas. They're just more formal coding ideas, like we can use a software, we can put things in a different spreadsheet, in different categories. But I always found affinity notes or affinity diagrams are really fun to do. Like in my class, the students just found their living room, like a group of people just work together, and they take a picture of their affinity notes, and they summarize this afterwards. It's really fun and engaging data analysis methodology. So again, what we're trying to do next, we know this disease is invisible. It's so different in every single person, and people really don't know how to deal with it. And a lot of people just suffer from it without any help. We searched and see what kind of technologies are there, and there's very few. And we look at people's concerns in the online forum, what they talked with others, what kind of problems they have no place to ask. They have to look for people online to ask. We interviewed people, we interviewed the patient, both really severe patient and also patient with just really mild syndromes. We're in the process of interviewing some doctors. So we have a whole lot of data in this stage, and we're trying to analyze it using affinity diagrams methodology, like what are the themes in all those different type of data from that many different people, what are the main things concerns people, and what we can do from there. So this summer, we're doing the data analysis, and we're trying to write the articles about this, even though we haven't done any technology related work yet. We're trying to write an article just to say, when we design technology, what we should do. Should we just ask people to put in whether I have migraine or not, like the iPhone application I have, or should we do something more? What kind of thing people are need? So this is the first step we're trying to get. We're trying to write articles on that. And afterwards, we're planning to design a prototype. I didn't cover this in my class. I didn't have these slides. But a lot of times we draw the interface, what should look like, what are the main functionalities should look like in the systems, and then we materialize and program that out afterwards. So this summer, we're going to work on the data analysis, mainly on data analysis part, and after that, we're moving towards into designing a real technological interventions. And after this, probably we will try out with the people we know have migraine and see whether things would work for them. I think it's almost time. Do you want to show anything? We can just open this as a question. If you have any questions about either the goal of the project or methodologies or follow up what we want to do, we're just going to be here for another 50 minutes and we can talk about that.
We have questions?